So I am the Director of Research at Earth Policy Institute. My background is in Earth Systems Science. So I'm more of a science person than a message person, but I have messages that I want to get out. And for about the past decade or so, I've been tracking very closely climate change in the news. We read several newspapers every day, news wires, science journals, magazines, popular media. And I have to say that over just the last 10 years, the amount of material we're collecting that's relevant to climate and environment and these issues that we study at Earth Policy Institute has just ballooned enormously, which in some ways you'd think is fantastic news because people are starting to pay attention to it, the media's starting to get it, yet at the same time the progress has not been keeping up with the volume of the news. And when you have, in a lot of climate media, for a very long time, reporters, in an attempt to maybe be fair and balanced, would always take the word of a scientist who has spent many, many years studying one particular aspect of the climate, and they'll take their message and their study, which usually says, yes, climate change is real, we're causing it, it's very serious, and here's why we have to pay attention. And then they'll take the word of a fossil fuel financed expert and put them back to back. So we have 1-to-1, when in reality, everybody here probably knows that the real truth is, among the scientific community, it's about 99-to-1. So in an attempt to appear balanced, we've actually confused the public by having them think, oh, it's an evenly matched debate. We really don't know what's going on. It's very confusing. Now, some journalists have started to correct that, and some reporters are doing a good job. But overall, I think the message is confused. And it's up to people like us to figure out how can we set it straight. When I have friends with PhDs from the top universities in this country, you know, in physics or mechanical engineering or something, and they come to me and say, is this really real? It baffles me that they've gotten that far without knowing, but it's true. And so we need to figure out how we could change that. And because of this confusion, I think people like me, environmentalists, scientists, we're stuck on defense when what the world really needs is offense. We need an offensive, full-court press to figure out what we can do about this problem. Those of us who care about preserving life on the planet as we know it really need to get active. Every man, woman, child, major corporation, and politician too needs to be involved. And so at Earth Policy Institute, we were trying to figure out what are the important questions. And we're in Washington, D.C., where everybody is saying, okay, we have climate change. What's politically feasible now? What's going to happen in the next Congress? And we at EPI decided to ask a different question. We're not asking what's politically feasible. We asked, what is needed? What is needed to prevent climate change from spiraling out of control and preserving the world that we know it? And so when we ask the question that way, we don't get carbon cuts by 2050. We get massive carbon cuts needed in the short term by 2020 if we want to do things right to preserve the climate as we know it. And so we decided that since we're asking not what's politically easy, not what's politically feasible, but what we need to do, we devised a plan for the globe to cut net carbon emissions 80% by 2020, not 2050. No politician who's talking about 2050 is going to be in office then to be held accountable. 2020, which means we need to start yesterday by getting things moving fast. And in our plan, which I don't have time to detail today, but it's available on earthpolicy.org on our website. The book is available for free downloading, or there's copies out there for a discounted $10 a copy. It has 4 main components. Number 1 is to stabilize population, 2, eradicate poverty, 3, to restore the natural systems that are the foundation of our economy, and 4, to stabilize climate. And just to briefly talk about the climate plan, it has three main components within that. The first one's efficiency. easy stuff, great for messaging. Everybody loves efficiency. It saves us money. We can do it right away. We can do it fast. An easy message to get out to people was always, change your light bulbs, right? And I thought, well, gosh, you know, you can tell people to change your light bulbs, but come on, what can it really mean to do to change the light bulbs? We can't just change light bulbs. We need to change politicians. And I still stand by that. But we actually crunched the numbers on the light bulb thing, and we found out that if you change all the light bulbs around the world from the most inefficient kind to efficiencies like compact fluorescent bulbs, not even the highly efficient LEDs that are coming to market now and becoming more cheap, if you change all those light bulbs around the world, you could save enough energy to close 700 of the world's 2,400 coal-fired power plants. Just with light bulbs. I mean, that's an 18-second shift. So light bulbs are important. Same things with general appliances in the home, similar savings potential available. We talk about renewable energy, wind, solar, geothermal. If we build 1.5 million wind turbines over the next 10 years, we can meet our energy goal along with solar, no rooftops left behind, geothermal, amazing potential there around much of the world. And things are moving pretty fast in this area, faster than we could have imagined. And then the last part of that is tree planting, tree preservation, and soil stabilization. And to do all this, we need to get the price right. We need a price on carbon. We talk about coupling reduction in income taxes with an escalating price on carbon, gradually increasing up to about $200 per ton, which when you compare with what the Europeans are paying for gasoline, still is paltry. It wouldn't raise our gas prices to their levels. To close, I'll say, you know, people say, how on earth can this be done? And our president, Lester Brown, likes to look back at World War II when he's thinking about how social change can happen really fast. We had in December 1941, Pearl Harbor. A month later, President Roosevelt stood before the country, gave his State of the Union address, and said, we're going to build a massive army. We're going to have 60,000 planes and 44,000 tanks and an enormous amount of merchant shipping capacity, numbers no one could have ever believed. And he called in the heads of the auto manufacturers to his office, and he said, you have the industrial manufacturing capacity, not of this country, but of the world. You are going to help us achieve this goal. And they said, of course, Mr. President, we'll do what we can. It's going to be a little tough building these cars and doing these other things, but we'll try. And he said, you don't understand. You're not going to be building cars. And so they devoted everything to the war effort, and everybody got involved. And it became, you know, there was a big threat, perceived or real, both, to the American way of life, but people banded together for a common cause. And it didn't take decades, it didn't take years, it took a matter of months to restructure the entire US economy. And there were social changes happening at the same time that allowed that to happen, with women going to the workforce and daycares built in neighborhoods so that women were allowed to go, and we took care of families, and people planted gardens, and they had a common cause. And that happened enormously fast. Now, some of those systems we've since dismantled, and people wonder if we can indeed muster up that common cause. But when we have the biggest threat that humanity has ever faced, I think we really have no other alternatives. And so our message has shifted. It's no longer saving the environment. It's not saving the planet. It's really saving civilization that's at stake. And saving civilization can't be a spectator sport, so we need everybody involved. And I look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you very much.
One of the costs of global warming is sea level rise, and it will destroy property values. And Mr. Kamenov didn't know if anybody made a simple graph that deniers could look at and see that it's going to cost the country $1 billion or $100 billion, you know, if the sea level goes up so far, why not save it and spend it now on the carbon tax instead? Has any research been done, or can it be done?
Yes, a lot of research has been done about how much sea level will rise, and now it's in fact recommended for planning agencies at state and local levels that when they're planning things for the next 50 to 100 years, they're no longer looking at a matter of 2 to 3 feet sea level, but they're looking at 2 meters, 6 feet of sea level potential as they're starting to plan things, was the news from the last week. So in terms of the cost of all of that, there have been a variety of studies that looked at the cost of climate change as a whole, like the Stern Review report that was mentioned earlier. I know sea level is a component of that, but I don't know how much for this country. I've seen maps done by, I think, EDF, looking at the potential flooding, so how much of Florida will be gone by the end of the century if business as usual continues. But there are costs to that, and you can already see it right now in insurance rates for coastal properties. A lot of the private insurers are pulling out of coastal areas now, and so we're left with states insuring these vulnerable properties, becoming the insurers of last resort. So it's actually our money as taxpayers going to pay for these properties that are subject to stronger storms and sea level rise.
So is that something you might work on in the future, more of the real estate devaluation or costs due to this rise?
I know there's people working on it. We can probably find who is doing that.
Yes, my question is not directly to you, but maybe a rhetorical question to the movement. You're about the 6th person I've heard tell that wonderful story about Pearl Harbor. And my question to the group is, why don't we all get together and work to force President Obama to do something like that? Because he's the one person who could do that. And if we all focused our energy on one person together in unity, we might actually have an impact.
And everybody always asks, what would be do we need a Pearl Harbor moment, or can it happen organically?
Climate change won't present a Pearl Harbor, or you could argue we had it with Katrina, or you could argue we had it with the fires in Russia. It's going to be too easy to deny because it's not going to come down on us all at once. We're going to have 100-year floods every 3 years, but the weather people are going to say, oh, it's been wet this year, or it's been hot this year, but they're never going to connect the dots. And we people who know this in the climate movement, if we could all unite and not try to mess with the underwear down in the Congress to rewrite bills, but to focus on the man in charge, who we elected to be our leader, to defend us from a common threat, which is his job. Sort of gets to Jim Hansen's point earlier, that there's a legal obligation of our country to defend us from danger. And because this is a danger we've never seen before, people may not recognize it, but he's smart enough to get it with Holdren and Chu and other advisors he has. But he needs the pressure from the people to take his responsibility to do it. And I think we in the climate movement have an obligation, because we know this, to hold his feet to the fire so he will do it.
And not one person's great, work on Obama, but also work on your local officials from the bottom up. And it's something that needs to be repeated over and over again. With one messaging point is that that probably will be covered later, but the conservative right has been quite successful at saying over and over and over again the same exact messages, whereas environmentalists and we sort of try to, how do we do it new, or how do we do it different? We need to sort of figure out what are the right messages and just say them over and over and over again until they start to become widely understood and sort of our mantra.